I think we will begin. Is there a lighting thing that's going to happen here, Christine?
Oh yeah, I'm on it.
Sure we're going to dim the lights here so the PowerPoint, the folks online can see that better. It's just the contrast works better on the internet if we've got those out. So don't fall asleep yet. Wait till I start droning on. All right, so our debrief for the midterm is actually available. This slideshow is available right now online. We just popped it up. If you go to the website, recorder.maricopa.gov, and go to the publications button there, it's lit up. You'll see it. It's going to be the first selection that you get. So if you're having a tough time at home following along, open up another tab, and you'll be able to look at some of the digits and the slides a little bit better. I wanted to get that up before the end of the presentation so everyone could see the information. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put this election in context, because one of the important things that we have to do is really make sure that our conversation is coming from the same set of facts, and almost all of this is you're going to recognize if you've been following the elections here in Maricopa County for the last decade or so. First of all, we've got to set the stage. Maricopa County for a long time has been one of the fastest growing counties in the United States of America. As one of the largest counties then, when we are one of the largest counties and our percentage of growth is one of the largest, we're seeing a raw number in growth that is not seen in other parts of the United States. If we start with these numbers, over in 2000, we only had 1.2 million registered voters back over here. By the time we hit 10 years ago, in 2008, we had 1.7 million. So in that 8-year period, we grew by 700,000. I'm sorry, about, excuse me, 500,000. And then by the time we get to 2018, we're at 2.2 million. So just in that 18-year period, insofar as registered voters are concerned, we gained 1 million voters from the year 2000. Think about that for a moment. From 1.2 to 2.2 million registered voters. That is a massive, massive increase in the sheer volume of work that has to be done. And so many of you helped us as poll workers or troubleshooters or deputy recorders here. Some of our staff is here, so we're glad about that. When you really look at this, this is an amazing increase in growth, and we don't see it slowing down at all anytime soon. But we have to be prepared for this. And one of the critical components of this is we have to look at our systems. The way we administer these elections has not changed since 1996.
If you want to come with me,
when it comes to our precinct-based polling places, when it comes to our central tabulation.
The sound quality on here. Okay, yeah, I'll show you.
And this is not atypical. The smooth line of the primaries tells us that during primary elections, we can see a relatively predictable, steady line of growth, proportionate. It's not very, very different year in and year out. But what we do see in the general elections is that we have these spikes during presidential years. But I'll ask you to look over here to the last two elections. The general election of 2016 was the presidential cycle. That was the single largest election in the history of the state of Arizona and in Maricopa County. And you'll see that up until that point, that was our largest primary as well. Interestingly, you go back 3 cycles to 2010 to get our prior largest primary election. Right? It dipped a little bit and it came back up. But look at the dip between the last presidential election at 1.6 million votes cast and this midterm election, 1.4 million votes cast. We also saw a little bit of a higher uptick between the 2016 primary at 555,000 and the 2018 primary at 699,000. Think about it, that's a 144,000 vote increase in 2 years from primary to primary. It's a pretty big jump when you're talking about raw volume.
See if that's
And so
better.
when we look
All
at
the way
this,
up.
we have to ask ourselves, these predictions? How do we do these numbers? How do we figure this out? And then you look to the performance of the operation during the primaries and the general elections. We always improve between August and November. This year was no exception to that rule. We had almost 700,000 voters in the primary for 2018 and twice that for the general election. And we didn't have anywhere near the issues in the general because we got a hold of what was going on. We also all right.
Preston, how many options there are on that thing to dial it in?
What's that?
Preston, on that app, how many options you have to dial things in?
There's quite a few.
Yellow underneath.
It's like what assistant that calculation.
Ballots mailed to them. Now, some of them actually bring their ballots in, which is great. Get a sticker. We all want a sticker. And one of the most interesting pieces of this is right here between, so these two are 2004, this is the primary and this is the general, and they go in pairs. The next pair is the primary and general for 2006. Before the 2008 primary, which is where we see this giant increase in the vote by mail population, there was no permanent early vote list. For those of you that are a little newer to the environment, you got a postcard mailed to you from the county recorder's office. You had to say, yes, I want my ballot mailed to me. You would send it back to us, and we would send you back your ballot, and you'd send the ballot back to us. Well, that got a little pricey. So the legislature in 2007 said, let's create a permanent early vote list, which is why we had that huge spike in the primary election in 2008. Remember, primaries are much lower turnout, but it's a much steadier, it's like you get those party stalwarts, you get those folks that are engaged in primaries. That's why that number spiked so high. So the overall turnout was a bigger number in the general of 2008, but the proportion of mail-in ballots was lower, and that's because of the actual numbers. But all you got to do is look beyond that. General 2008, 55%. General 2010, 66%. General 2012, 69%. General 2014, 81%. And we had a huge spike in population between 2014 and 2016, and the number of vote by mail or ballot by mail voters dropped a little bit, down to 78%. It was also a very big population. It was a big number. It was our biggest election yet. Now we have the general 2018. We're back up to 81%. This is total turnout. Okay, it's not the total number of folks who are registered to vote who are on these lists. Right now, we're looking at a 2018 general. 81% of our voters who vote are on the permanent early vote list. But of our registered voters, we're in the low 70s. So if you take the idea that 71 or 72% of our voters are accounting for 81% of our turnout, the only reasonable deduction you can make from that is that people who are signed up for the permanent early vote list are more likely to vote. It's really that simple. That's what all of our numbers tell us. And so if we want greater engagement in our democracy, if we want better civil discourse, better civil engagement, we want people to participate, which is, I think we can all agree that's what we want. We seem to have a good recipe here to make that happen. All right, let's move along. Now we're going to talk specifically about this midterm by the numbers again. That was all in context. Biggest election except for the presidential in 2016. Now we're going to look specifically at our midterm here. So we've got our primary from 2018 and our general from 2018, August and November. All right. Our total turnout for the primary was 31%. That's 700,000 voters of the total registered voters. Not bad. Not great, but not bad. In the general, we were estimating we'd get somewhere between, I can't remember what the numbers were originally, 53, 54%, right? Because it's a midterm, we're expecting that dip again.
that you remember from several slides ago. Well, the dip didn't come. It went down a little, but not much. 64% of our registered voters voted in the general election in 2018. That's enormous. That means that people are engaged and people are voting, and that's really good for our democracy. Of these, then, 81% of the general voted by mail, and in the primary, 85%. So what we're looking at is precinct-based polling places. In other words, you have a single precinct, you go to that place. That's not the way Maricopa County voters vote. 80+% across the board, and we're not going to see these numbers go down. I can guarantee you. Those of you that vote by mail understand the convenience. You know you've got time to research things. Benefits are enormous. And our in-person voters, again, 15% of our turnout. That's not our total voters. 15% of that 31% voted in person in the primary, and then 19% in the general. This is at our 500 polling locations all over Maricopa County. All right. Election workers, that's y'all. That's our big giant 4,000 body plus election family. Deputy registrars, poll workers, board workers, troubleshooters. These are the round numbers we saw in the primary, 2,500, 3,100 in the general, 254 temporary employees in the primary, over 800 in the general. And the only reason this one shows no data for the primary is because before August of 2018, we never recorded the idea that a person was coming to us from one of the circumstances of August, and we had to rely on our folks from the county to get some of those technical jobs done. We started tracking that. We had, somewhere south of 400 county employees come in and help us out. And that's important, because these are people who dedicated themselves to public service in other areas, and then for the purpose of our election, they came to help us out. So we really do appreciate that. We really do. All right, so emergency voting under 542H is, for some reason, a big issue. 16542H has been on the books in Arizona for probably the better part of the last 3 or 4 decades, as far as I can tell, maybe more. Switch out. Okay, perfect. And you can see what it says here is that qualified electors can request a vote in the manner prescribed by the county recorder of their respective county. The emergency means any unforeseen circumstance that would prevent the elector from voting at the polls. Again, this has been on the books for decades. And in Maricopa County, we've always had emergency voting here at this facility. We've always had emergency voting out in Mesa, at the election office down there, at the courthouse. We've always had emergency voting up the street at the recorder's office when it was open on the day before the election day. That's just the way it has been. Big difference, I think, this year is that we told people about it. I mean, I don't know anything other than, and here's the thing, that's the impact. Percentage of total voters. Out of an election where you have 1.2, 1.4 million voters casting their ballots. And oh, by the way, everybody that went there had to put their ballot in an envelope. That signature had to be verified, just like everybody else who early votes. So, I feel very good about the issue. I followed the law, as you can see and read for yourself. And I said, we're going to tell people that they have the option. If you find out that someone passed away and the funeral's on Election Day Tuesday, and you find out Friday, what are you going to do? You can't order an early ballot anymore when you're not going to vote. All right. Some of the other issues that we saw this season, I think, are really importantly illustrated here. And again, we're going to talk about positives and some of the negatives too. It's only fair. We remember that back in August, that's the gold numbers, 62 of our polling places were not open on time on primary day. These columns represent the time through the morning as the hours passed. At 6:01 a.m., we were down by 62. By 7 a.m., we were only down by 49, and that got reduced by 8 a.m. There were only 22 locations that were not open. Still not great. By the time we hit 10 a.m., there were only 4 that had opening issues, and by 11 a.m., it was just 1. And so what we see on this line is the percentage, based on this, from 80% to 100% performance. We went from something between 84 and 88% all the way up to 100% open by the time we got to midday. We had significant and severe problems. We had performance issues, and we resolved them as quickly as we could. And for the rest of the day, we did well. And we still have to be reminded to ourselves that the volume of the voters that we had in that very same election was enormous compared to prior elections. So we accomplished a great deal and kind of got past that. And then in November, once we got all those county employees and we figured out what was going on, we resolved the circumstance by doing that job ourselves. Now let's look at the difference. That's the blue lines. 6 a.m. 3 polling places are not open. Here's why. Some of them are fun stories. At one church, the church lady didn't bring the key, and so we couldn't get in. We waited, she got there. I can't remember what time she got there. That one was open by 7 o'clock. I think that's the first one that we ended up opening up. That's why we got down to 2 by 7. Another one, our folks delivered the ballots, the machines, delivered the voting booths, all the equipment, got it set up, ready to go. On election day Tuesday, and at about 9 o'clock at night, Monday night before election day, as we understand, the landlord came and had a locksmith change the locks. They foreclosed on the renter. The landlord had no idea that we had rented from their renter to have a polling place. And so I was going to go down with a sledgehammer, but then the sheriff was like, come on, you don't need to do that. So by the time we hit 8 o'clock in the morning, we didn't have any polling places that were still unavailable to voters. The other one, we had a little bit of a technical issue. We fixed that pretty quickly too. That was out in Mesa, close to a vote center, so we diverted. So it wasn't perfect, but I'll tell you this. We ran an election with 503 polling locations, and that's what was closed. So from August to, from this line in August to this line in November, I think we did a really good job. This doesn't mean that we got it perfect, and I want to say that. This doesn't mean that we are the best in the business. What it means is we know how to solve problems. We know how to confront issues head on and take care of our voters as quickly as we can. All right. So then we did this. We asked questions. We sent out a survey after the midterm, and we kind of puckered up a little bit waiting for those responses because the August midterm and the primary didn't go so great, but the general went really well. Let's talk about the primary first. We got almost 30,000 responses from early voters in the primary. And what did they say? 91% agreed or strongly agreed that overall their voting experience was positive. 91% of those almost 30,000. Now, if that doesn't send a strong message to our staff, to our volunteers, to our workers, nothing does. We had 1,000, just over 1,000 respondents for in-person voting. This is just the primary for 2018, August. That agreement number was down a little bit, but still, good voting experience, 83%. That's not terrible. And a lot of industries, you'll take that number. But again, elections, we're under a microscope. That's okay. So let's go to the general and see what those same things were about. For the surveys, we got 42,000 plus a full 12,000 more respondents. The in-person voters, though, look at that. We only had 583 in-person respondents to the same survey. Interesting. I was very, very curious when you had twice as many almost answering for the primary, right? But the numbers, again, on our early voters. These are our people voters, people who came in early, permanent early vote list folks. They like the experience, and that's fantastic. We're super excited about that. In person, only got a 63% on the agree or strongly agree that they had a positive experience. But again, look at how small this is. We're talking about a million, $1.2 million, $1.4 million, I can't remember the specific number. So this is the feedback that we got. It's all voluntary. It's as scientific as you want it to be. Now, a small percentage of those surveys gave us some commentary. And the way we collected this was we looked at the commentary and we put it into sort of general themes. And we got the top 3 out of those. Top 3 positive, top 3 negative. And these were the top 3 concerns among our early voters and among our in-person voters. Right, you can see right here, kind of an interesting combination, an interesting mix. I won't read it too much because I want to make sure to get the panel up here and chat with them. You can read this for yourself, and again, it's going to be available online. Go to the next one here real quick. These are the positive comments. Look at that over there. 31% of the people who made comments said thank you for a positive experience of our early voting. Really phenomenal. This we had folks in person so they feel like they needed to in this survey, right? So you can see these numbers up here. Again, this sample is small. It's just the people who made comments, all right? But we wanted to get that feedback and put it out there as part of this debrief. So here's where we get to some very important points, all right? A lot of folks are interested in looking at the past and analyzing the past, sort of as we've done, putting it in context, looking at real numbers, and that's all well and good. And we talked to folks about it. We've got the surveys, we're doing this here, but we still need to keep our eye on the prize. And we have to look forward. Some of the things that we need to talk about are incredibly important. And so that's why we wanted to do this little bit of a look forward. First, I need to lose a little weight. All right. Our tabulation system, which is the same system that requires the snag boards, ballot duplication, the write-in stuff, all that post-election stuff that took such a long time, a lot of that's tied into our tabulation system. The fact that those precinct-based tabulators out there in the field can only handle a small number of ballot styles, that's part of that system. If it has to do with counting the ballots, counting the votes on the ballots, that's our tabulation system. Our current contract is up after the 2020 election. We don't have a choice. And if there was anything that my predecessor had mentioned over and over and over again, as she mentioned again in January or December in an article, she's been telling folks since 2014, we need a new system, we need a new system. And lo and behold, we need a new system. Now the good thing is, today and 2 days ago, and next week, we've got vendors for these new systems coming in, making presentations to our staff, folks from county audit, procurement, HR, county manager's office, chairman's. I was sitting next to the chairman's chief of staff at our presentation today, looking carefully at what's out there and what's available for us. We're using all those teams of career professionals to help us make the right choices for Maricopa County. Not just because we want to improve, but because we don't have a choice. We've got to upgrade. We'll see if we might be able to do it even before 2020, but we're getting close. We can't avoid the fact that we've added 1 million voters in less than 20 years. We can't avoid that fact. And we're not going to get smaller. And I don't see us splitting up into several counties. So, look, we've got to deal with the circumstances. Numbers are numbers. People are people. And we live in one of the greatest communities in the nation. I mean, just look at the weather today for crying. I was kind of sad to be stuck inside all day. Right? That's why we live here. And guess what? All of you people keep telling everyone to move here. Your friends and family in like Buffalo, they're snowed in. You know, you've got relatives in Michigan, they want to move out here. I mean, stop it. Stop talking. We don't need it out here.
But we do need to meet the increased workload. We're actually very close to where we were 10 years ago in staffing. We didn't staff up after our drawdowns after the 2008 recession. So we've got to pump that up, and that's why I asked the Board of Supervisors for more than 24 new employees just in the election department alone. We cannot run a best-in-class operation when we're stressing our people out, when we're working them to the bone. It's just not possible, and it's not right. It's not right for the voters. Nationally, vote at home is becoming the norm. We have to be prepared for that. A study was published just a couple of days ago that showed that by the time we get to 2024, more than 50% of the voters in the entire country are going to be voting at home. We already know that over 80% of our own turnout is on the permanent early vote list. Now, I'm not going to deny anybody the capacity to come in and vote if they want to experience that sort of civic pride thing and get their sticker and all that good stuff. That's fine. We'll keep that available, of course. But at the end of the day, we have to really ask ourselves the question: how much energy and resources, how many people out in the field, how much equipment are we going to have out there for folks? I'll take you to the special election for CD8 less than a year ago. We had a polling location set up that had 11 voters show up. Given the equipment, the staff, the transportation costs, moving everything, the fuel costs, and all of that sort of stuff, it cost us more than $250 per voter for those 11 voters. Now, you hear a lot of folks talking about, oh, I don't care if it costs $10,000 per voter. Yeah, you do. Yes, you do care about that. Because I have to look at the budgets, and so does everybody else. We're not going to be in a position to be able to have as many polling sites open as we move more and more towards ballot by mail or vote at home. But let me alleviate some of those concerns about, well, longer lines, this and that, right? This fall, both in August and in November, there were very few reports of long lines. Very few proportionately, right? Well, guess what? Compared to available in the primary and general of 2016, we only had 503 available this time. We had 180 less polling places available on election day in 2018, and we had far less complaints of long lines. Why? Because our staff created technology to check people in faster, we trained better, and we were able to process people through more quickly. Just that check-in process alone. Because the staff knew what needed to be solved, and I let them do it, and I got them the resources to do it. These guys have been around for a while. You'll meet a couple of them in a minute. They know what's up. In fact, I've been talking too long. Let's go ahead and get these folks up here. And we're going to start by introducing, can we go ahead and get the overheads back up, please? I think this is where I kicked you off to the other side of the table. I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep. Now we're going to start with Ray Valenzuela. You guys know him. He's the election director here. He started working in Maricopa County Elections Warehouse back in, I don't know, was it like the Wilson administration? Dewey wins. So 3 decades. For the past 28 years, he's been with Maricopa County. I appointed him in April of 2017 to oversee all of this stuff. And interesting fun fact about Ray is that he met his wife in, was it 8th grade school?
I wasn't an adult, I was in grade school with him.
They were the same age. Sorry.
You said it.
They were the same age, and they went to different high schools, and then they met again at ASU, and they were like, and they're still married. So Ray Valenzuela, give him a round of applause. I'm going to bring up Catherine Coleman next. Catherine Coleman is, she's in her 3rd year in the election department. She's been working with elections officials and candidates and stuff for 15 years in a variety of different capacities. She's my director, she's my deputy recorder for communications, manages the community relations team. She's a project manager here on elections. She's a legislative advisor for me, and a fun fact about her is she once drove, oh, I remember this. I remember this because I was teasing you about it. She once drove 1,000 miles to watch a total solar eclipse in the path of totality in 2017. And in her free time, she reads about astrophysics. Captain Coleman. And then look, if you're a candidate, if you're a poll worker, if you're anybody that has anything to do with anything that has to do with elections in Maricopa County, you've known her since she was 17 years old. She's been working here. She's been here for well, I'm not going to tell them. It's been a while. She's my assistant director of elections. Her responsibilities include, again, candidates, polling places, recruitment, equipment, customer service, and she has an extreme fear of heights. And so when we have meetings, I have to sit in chairs that are lower. She doesn't like to. And she loves dolphins. Christy Passarelli. So here's how we're going to do this. Christine, you have some of them? Okay, great. So these are some of the questions that you all have written down. And some of these are questions, I think. Do we have any of the online stuff in yet?
Some of the online stuff's in there.
Okay, some of the online stuff is in here. And then I have a stack of previous questions that people have emailed in and stuff. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask the questions here to the panel. We'll try to keep the responses to about 2 minutes so we can run through some of these things and cover a lot of subjects as we go forward. So if you still have questions, go ahead and keep filling those out. And we've got some of our volunteers on the sides here. Be happy to help out with this. All right. So I'm going to butcher this name, and I apologize, to a board worker named Lowell Schwalbe or Schwal. Lowell asks this question. Exactly how are provisional ballots added to the ballot count, and how are they checked for duplication and accuracy? Which one of you is going to take that? Ray doesn't want to take any of the questions.
Actually, and it's wonderful again. Thank you all for coming, because not only just for you to either bar squad or grill us, but it allows us to break some of these myths. One of the things is about the provisional ballots. The folklore out there is provisional ballots don't count unless the election's close. Absolutely untrue. Has never been the case. Whether there's difference of 1 or 100,000, every valid provisional ballot that's cast counts. Now, how does that work, and what's the purpose of it? So the 2018 general, we had over 16,000 provisional ballots. It's basically a safety net. You come in and you are not found in the register, whether it's electronic or paper. It could be that, and there's scenarios where we can talk about later as to what categories fit that provisional ballot cast. But basically, those 60,000 voters came in, and there was something that was not found in the register, and a lot of times it's Reynaldo. I come in there and I say my name is Ray, R-A-Y, and I can't find a Ray Valenzuela because I'm under Reynaldo, R-E-Y. And board workers can see, you know, if we're, that's the beauty of our new system with the driver's license scan, helps eliminate some of that key. But the provisionals are basically a safety net to say, you come in here, we're not going to turn you away, and then after, oh yeah, I found you, Reynaldo, next year, 2 years, you get to vote. Sorry about that. So it's, we can't find you, but we're not going to disenfranchise you. Here's a ballot, place it in this envelope, which makes it secure, which means I'm not putting it in the tabulator. You're putting it in an envelope, comes back to us, and how it gets into the mix is we actually do research. That upon is one of the things why, on top of why the results are not as fast as most people believe they should be, because we get those 16,000, we got to look at everything to ensure that ballot's good. So just so you know, the provisional ballots are treated similar to early ballots, where they get researched. If they're valid, they get sent to a system board, they're open, and they're sent to be counted and tabulated. And again, every single one of them that are valid was and are counted. They're not only if the election's closed.
All right. We didn't hit the timer because we got Sophia lurking in the back with timing things. So Ray, congratulations. I think that's the first. You stayed within time.
Thank you.
Without getting prompted. Shirley Corrigan, who's a board worker and a deputy registrar, wants to know, this one you guys didn't see. Some of these they saw beforehand, so it's kind of like cheating, but not really. What new equipment will you have for the 2020 election to expedite counting of ballots? We have such a large metropolitan area, which we talked about a little bit. So, who wants to take that one? Catherine, you want to talk a little bit about that? Christy, you want to talk a little bit about that?
I didn't get to go to the demo.
Christy didn't go, so Catherine, Ray, you talk about it.
So, hello everybody.
All right.
As the recorder indicated, we are looking at new equipment. Everybody here obviously is here because you participate, so you're familiar with the Maricopa County ballot. And there is technology. There is technology out there and better practice ballots that we are going to be looking at with that implementation of this new technology where they're using ovals, where people are familiar with that SAT kind of thing. Circa 1996 is what our equipment is, and that was the technology that existed. So we indeed are looking towards that new technology to not only to make a better ballot, but also to expedite the end game of counting provisionals, early ballots, and those 400,000 early ballots that were collected from Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and dropped off at the polls. So it is indeed a goal where we're headed.
So let me talk really briefly and dovetail off of that. How many of you were here after the election and worked on perhaps a duplication board where you looked at those screens? So for the folks watching that, a lot of you. So for the folks watching, what ends up happening is, let's say for example, with our current technology, if there's what looks like somebody voted twice for a race that's pick only one or something, or if there was like a bleed through that went in there, or if there's something that has to be looked at, 1996 technology didn't allow us to do what today's technology does. In those cases, we had to pull the ballot, someone had to look at it and decide which pile it goes into. Then if it went to one of you all in those due boards, you got to look at it, you know, a Republican and a Democrat were different parties, and just like juries do in criminal trials, you made a determination of voter intent, you looked at it, you judged it, and then we had to duplicate the ballot to run it back through the machines. Why did we do that? Because only the machines are certified in the logic and accuracy testing. We can't just change the numbers. In the new systems, we don't have to have that whole middle step. We can go straight to you all. And we can automatically run a lot of that stuff without having to go then back and reprint. So a lot of this new technology is some of the stuff that we're looking at that's going to help. That's one small example. All right. Back to the early submitted question. Doug Arvanides? Is that you, Doug? Did I pronounce it right?
No, that's okay.
That's so embarrassing. So Doug, thank you for coming, is a board worker from Scottsdale, and he asked, I was a poll worker in the 2018 primary and general election. I observed a high level of voters showing up at the wrong polling location. How can we leverage all the digital broadcast and direct mail marketing we do to address these issues? Who's taking that one?
That sounds like a me.
Sounds like a communication.
Hi, Doug. Thank you for your question. And thank you, everybody, for being here, especially many of the central board workers who I recognize your faces, and it's wonderful to see you again. So I'm hearing actually two questions from you, which is one, how do you provide better access to voters? And two, how do we communicate better to voters here? So I'm gonna take the first part of your question, which is turning away voters or redirecting voters to a new polling location. I know the recorder talked about this a little bit in his presentation, and we were big fans in addition to other counties who use vote centers. So being able to check in a voter from anywhere in the county at a polling location is going to cut down heavily on making sure that we were providing access at the time that the voter walks in the door then. And then additionally, over the last 2 years, we have really built out the Deputy Registrar group, which is a group of volunteer Deputy Registrars who go out and help register voters. They do education at schools for high school students, and they work with us during election time. And using both the theory that voting is a habit and we need to teach it early in life. So we are going into those schools, we're trying to get that habit in early. We are working with our partners in other counties at the Secretary of State's office and at the Clean Elections Commission to make sure that we're all using the same words, that we're making everything conform in a way that voters can understand very easily. And we're trying to push that information out to our networks as often as possible. and then ask our networks to also share that information as well. So we will continue to do that, and we will do that increasingly as we get close to future elections.
All right, so Barbara Parton, who I think is here, because this is handwritten, said she's a board worker and a deputy registrar and a voter. Are you bringing those? Yeah, go ahead and bring them up while I ask this question. What's the possibility of making the Mayo voting centers, so the early vote centers, continue to act as all precinct centers on election day? Christy, I'm going to give this one to you. And number two, can the ballot be reorganized so that the judges' selections will be made by selecting a all yes or all no column as well? Can I tell a really quick story on that one? So when I was at the Denver DA, I'm sorry, personal privilege here. When I was at the Denver DA's office, one of our chiefs of one of the divisions had a big sign behind his desk, and it said, "Vote no, all judges." I used to take it from his office and put it in his front yard before every election, and then take it back to him. It wasn't me, it was him, but it was kind of interesting. Christy, what do you think about vote centers acting as all precinct centers on election day?
All Christie's dreams would come true if that happened.
I think all central board worker dreams would come true as well.
You all would love me more than you already do now. Yes, ultimately, there are counties that have nothing but vote centers on election day, and that allows the voters to vote in any location that they so choose. We actually had 40, which is pretty good. We had 40 places on election day where you could choose any of those 40 locations to vote at if they were more convenient than your assigned polling location. So we had a hybrid model. It worked very well for us, but ultimately I think that is my dream, is to have all vote centers in Maricopa.
And as to the question of reorganizing ballots with a yes to all and a no to all, maybe at the top, like the old ballots that used to say all one party type of thing.
Correct. So there is actually statutory provisions that guide the format of the ballot. So if that statute allowed us to have an all yes or an all no section, we would be able to do that. But right now, that's not possible.
So it's a call your legislator kind of thing?
Yes.
They're a little busy right now. I'm not going to say more because they're still in session. Tom Urso, board workers. Did Tom sneak in too? No? All right. He submitted this one. Why can't there be a process where early ballots get processed and scanned as they are dropped off at polling locations? Who's taking that one, Ray?
It's twofold, and it depends on the end game of why the question is being asked, if I may. But there's belief, and again, a little bit is a myth, that there are a lot of early ballots that dropped off at the polling place. 168,000. Now, as a voter, if you drop your ballot off because you chose to educate yourself and take your time, the issue is should we prevent that? And so you can go down different paths, but there's also ballots that are received again on Monday in the mail, Tuesday. At what point, if the question is asked towards, can we do it faster towards the end, and that's what caused it, then there is something to say, let's scan that ballot instead of it coming in here being signature verified and counted. Well, let me tell you now, if you're an early voter, we don't disenfranchise you to say your dog ate your ballot, I can give you a second ballot. You spoiled that ballot, just like if you went to the polls, you can get a second or a third. So, on our back end, in the early voting process, we give you a second, we void out that first. However, that means it can't be returned to us by mail. But that ballot is still a ballot. So if we allowed you or a voter to come in and put that in the machine, that could be your second ballot. So let me go a little bit backwards. And how do we allow for that? Then we have to put those 168,000 voters in line. There were 235,000 voters in line. Add an additional 268. They don't bypass the line. They are part of the line. So that line then grows exponentially. And then they can't just walk in and then still drop. They got to check in. So they got to bring voter ID. So it basically, either you say you can't drop it off and you must become a point place voter, which is what it is. So I can't allow you, but I need you to go to that line. The people that are there to vote early or vote in person, and that's their choice, now have to compete with those 168,000. So long story short is that you got several ballots. But I can tell you that all 1, 2, and 3 were voided. But just as a note, do we want to add those 168,000 voters in the line so that we can presumably speed up the end results the end of the election, when in fact, the myth here, early voting is not the slow part of it. We received over 168,000, we had those signature verified by noon the following day. That's not the slow part. The part is our antiquated tabulation system, so when we threw that 168,000 to the citizen board, it took them a day to get them separated, audit, but we could only process or tabulate 50,000 ballots a day because of our tabulation system that says you must stop, run a precinct report, and I don't want to throw our tabulation system into a workhorse, but it takes 4 hours to compile a daily report. So we had to stop at a certain point just to give the citizenry today's totals. So it became a constant battle. So, but I want you to know that the early voting is not the myth. It's a myth. It is not what causes the delay. A compilation of early voting, plus the provisional research, plus, yes, it does slow the process, but do we want fast or do we want correct? I mean, I liken it to, and if I may, you know, you ask an engineer how long it takes to build that bridge, it takes a year. Can you do it in 2 months? Okay, I'm not driving over that bridge. And I'm not trusting those results. The average, and ironically, we have taken 10 to 15 days. Statute actually gives us 20 because it knows that there's all of these details to do it right. We did this election, the general, in 14 days. To the candidates, don't get me wrong, I need to know if I won. And when they're close, we always pray for a very far, you know, spread for the candidates. So that, but for the candidates, yes. For the constituency, I want to know who the winner is. But in past, the 2016, for example, we took us 13 days to finish it. There just was a big spread, meaning all the winners were by 10,000. So although we were still reporting, it wasn't as big of a issue. So I get that, you know, there is, but technology is where we're at.
Yeah, why did it take so long this time around really was because we had very close races at the top of the ticket. I mean, if you look back in history and you look at when the last day was that we reported, going back 16 and 14 and 12, you know, we're not any longer. It's just everybody was anxious for a result. I mean, I had to wait for forever, I thought.
Point of privilege, when he was running, he was calling every day.
I would have been calling Christy anyway. Is Anna Rose Lilly here? I know she is. So Anna Rose, I'm going to call you out because you're awesome. Because you sent us a question and you wrote a question today. And so to be fair, I want to ask just one of them. Do you want the one that you sent earlier or the one you wrote today?
The one I wrote today.
The one you wrote today? Okay, thank you very much for letting me do that. All right, here's the question. Is there a plan to get out in front of the voters to address at these talking points? One, common errors in filling out a ballot that requires special handling. Two, how the recorder addressed problems that came up in 2018. Do we have a plan to talk to folks that might be more effective? Catherine?
Sure. Would you
No, just
okay.
common errors filling out ballot requirements, that's informing voters, and then like how do I become a better communicator?
Sure.
Good luck.
Thank you. Can I have more than 2 minutes on that?
No.
No. All right. Well, so thank you for the question again, Anna Rose. We have built out communications over the last 2 years. The person who led the communications team last year is phenomenal, and we're now working very closely with her. She's at the Secretary of State's office. So there will be even more coordination on those issues that voters commonly find, or that as the ballots come back here, we identify what issues may be popping up with each of those ballots, or each of those ballots, those voters processing of ballots. So we are in the process of writing that campaign. Right now we have the post-election report that we are finishing up that touches on some of the issues that we had in the August election and how we overcame them in the November election, specifically what we did, how we worked with our county partners. A big thank you to any county folks who are in the room, any county folks who are watching on the live stream right now. We called on them between the primary and the general, and we said, we need your help, we need your expertise. They came out in droves. We were able to get IT experts who helped us set up equipment, We were able to get troubleshooters who were mobile on election day. Additionally, we had central board workers who were coming in after their shifts during the day. And so really leaning on the other folks here at Maricopa County. We learned a lot from them as well. We learned that we do need to be better communicators about the process, and we need to teach what happens behind the scenes here. One of the anecdotes that I love that the reporter uses is it's kind of like your iPhone. Voting's really easy. You just press a couple of buttons, but all of the machinery inside, all of the pieces that are working together, that's what's happening in this building here. And they were able to tell us where the public wasn't getting enough information about our processes here. And so we're working to improve that, and through that and through our work with our partners, make sure that voters are able to avoid some of those pitfalls that they find when they come to the ballot box.
And I'll jump in a little bit here. Lorraine, who's here, Lorraine Bravo, also a board worker and a voter, asks something not dissimilar to that. Can we get a deeper training on what the process with absentee ballots, early voting, and a lot of it has to do with the question that voters often ask is what Lorraine said. Where's Lorraine? Thanks for this. Thank you very much. Yeah, so along those same lines, that's part of my responsibility is to be able to get out there and communicate better. To come back to the second part of that question, we're working on it. One of the most interesting parts about this is there's only one other person around who's ever done what I'm doing that, and forever, right? And she doesn't want folks bothering her with a lot of stuff. So, I've had to learn, and it's been a steep learning curve for me to be able to communicate better. One of those ideas of how I've had to learn is sort of this anecdote of the iPhone, right? There's a lot of engineering and physics and everything that goes into just touch and you got a camera, touch and you got a phone. That's complicated, and explaining very complicated systems. But so many of you have been here and you saw it. It's a ton of work, it's complicated. We do have to get better at that. And so one of the things we did last year was we created Mythbuster Monday, a series of 6 little videos, or 2 or 3 minutes long each, where we put them out there, tried to get some communication going and education going to help voters, and we're working on it. So we're going to keep trying to work on it and get better at that. I'm going to keep trying to work on it and get better.
And we're re-upping that series. We'll be refreshing those videos, putting the ones that are still applicable out. So if there are any myths out there or questions you have about elections that you think would be great for the general public for us to explain, we would love to hear that.
Right, and we got those themes, feedback from voters, right? People gave us feedback in some of our prior surveys, and we're like, these are the 6 big issues that we're hearing. So we put that out there. So we're working on it. All right, let's go to an online question now. Why are there 3 times as many ballots as required printed? Why are there 3 times as many ballots as are required printed? Is that a waste of resources? And this comes from Marcia Villa, a board worker. Who wants to take that?
I'll take that, Marcia, online. Thank you. The fact of the matter is probably Marcia's a board worker, I would assume, and anybody that's a board worker here will say, when I walked out of that polling place, I used this many ballots. This is my scientific amount measurement. And there were this many left. The reason being, statute says, and it's practical, I have to print 102% of the eligible voters. We don't know if that spike's going to be up or down, so we have to provide in case 102. Now, as the reporter shown in the PowerPoint, that we're getting 13 to 19% people come vote in person. So you're using that much, and it looks like 3 times the amount of ballots, but that's actually probably only 40% of the ballots set, because we mailed 1.6 million to the voters. So that 40% equates to about 700,000 of the rest of the voters. If they all showed up, if they didn't get an early ballot, we have to be prepared for that. That's the law. It's not that we know that it's likely that we're not going to exceed 25-30%. Could we cut back? The law says no. Can the law be changed? Yes. Can we opt to, and I want to be the biggest proponent and forced to state, a vote center does not take away your right to vote in person. It says it's using technology, saying you can go to your assigned, or if we go 100% vote center, you can go to any one of these through 27 days, all the way to including election day, and we don't pre-print ballots at vote centers. We have a ballot on demand system that is, you walk in, you check in just as regular polling place, except those 15,000 ballot styles. There's a potential at 15,000 variations of ballots to account for every district, every ledge, you can walk in and we have coded in your record which ballot's for you. It prints on the fly, so to speak. So there is technology there that we can get to that question and solve that. We would like to get there and hopefully with the community to get behind us and ask us what questions do you need to know, why can we go to vote centers, but I want to vote in person. By all means, we'll see you there at 6 a.m. on election day. It just happens to be you're getting a ballot printed for you, and you can go anywhere. So just keep in mind that we're not taking in, as the reporters say, we're not looking to remove that 13 or 15% from the mix that they want to vote on election day. That's there. We just need to do it more strategically and using the technology that exists.
One of the really interesting things that I have to deal with is in budgeting and the numbers. If you take the printing costs for the ballots that were unused in the 2016 and 2018 cycles, so for one big 4-year cycle, just the primary and general, we're not talking about special elections, municipal elections, none of that stuff, just primary and general 16, primary and general of 18, just the printing costs. That's not distribution to different polling places, security, recollection, and recycling costs, because we got to pay for that too. Just the printing costs for that 4-year period for unused ballots was about $728,000. Now, that's your tax money. That was just printing, not recycling, not all the rest of that stuff. And that is so that we can maintain, under the law, 102% of the potential voters at all of our polling places. I am not a fan of that type of waste. I am a fan of being smarter about things and more efficient. So if we can get to a place where, as Ray indicated, you can have vote centers where you can vote anywhere across the board. We can get you into either voting on a DRE or voting on, printing your ballots, or mail everybody, but whatever, right? I just don't like the idea, and it's because I like trees, I guess. So there's that. Marshall, thank you for that great question. All right, Delynn Johnston is here somewhere. Yeah, there you are. Thanks for coming and thank you for your question. Was a board worker, and so maybe Christy can talk a little about this because there was a lot of this stuff that she had to deal with. How many ballots were received and reviewed or recounted? And this is in the context of snags and dupes. How many board workers did the ballot review and recount take, and how many man hours did we expend in that review and recount period? What did that end up looking like?
I don't have any of those exact numbers in front of me, but I know that we have calculated several. For those of you that were here, we were here for many, many hours, every single day, doing all of those functions. So it takes citizen boards of more than 2 people, in some cases, 3. Write-ins take the longest. That's the last piece of the puzzle, manual tally. So many man hours, many staff hours. We're very grateful for all of those people that are here. I recognize several of you as having been here working around the time frame with us. That hundreds of thousands of ballots pass through.
So I'm going to go back here because I think there's a slide that speaks to this. I want to draw up a little. Okay, so again, this slide speaks exactly to that. I don't know if the camera's not going to jump on. That's fine. So for the online folks, I think we're on slide number X. In any event, if you look at the number of folks in the general election here, board workers and central board workers, temporary employees and central board workers, Maricopa County employees, see these numbers right here? All of these folks were getting paid. And not a single one of them counts in the following number. From July 1st to December 31st of this year, for our staff, my office has paid out $750,000 in overtime. That does not include any of these folks, just my staff, because of the amount of work that has to be done in these elections. When we look at this, what we're doing is we're throwing huge numbers of resources at a problem so that we can get it taken care of. And so we're using mass, not smarts. right? We're working harder. And a lot of you did. A lot of you sacrificed a lot of time. You came in shift after shift to help make that happen. But you saw how it worked out. And I think there's a better way to do it. I really do. And I'm really glad that you all are going to be part of the solution here. All right.
If I may add,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
do have the number. It was 160,000 that we duplicated. That folks that came in, we did 2 shifts. And it's a huge task. And those are votes that came out of the machine that said the intent of the voter. So it's quite a bit, and I don't draw overtime just there wasn't.
So we have one of our online questions now via Facebook Live. Thank you very much to Dale, I'm going to mess it up, William. And he says, why can't the addresses for our voter registration be updated when we update our vehicle registration? Ooh, Catherine, that sounds like one of you. That sounds like an election policy. Is that Ray?
That's Ray.
I don't know. You guys figure out what you answer.
All right, Ray.
Why can't we, when I go to get a driver's license at MVD, why don't they just update my voter registration?
The fact of the matter is, and if I may, there is legislation, the Help America Vote Act of many years ago indicated there was a motor voter law that said why you can even register motor vehicles now was because of that bill a decade ago. The difference was states had to decide, is it an opt-in or opt-out? Meaning when you come in, the state believed, back when that legislation was passed, that you didn't really want to register. We couldn't automatically do it because you may not want to be registered to vote. So they said you must do an additional step and tell MVD that in addition to that, please do that. New legislation, new sort of consent decrees are coming back saying, no, it's coming future forward, make it automatic opt-in. So it's going there with this consent decree. And the benefit of that is for those individuals that truly say, I didn't want to be registered to vote, then put your voter registration card that we send you that says you are in your birthday. You know, you don't have to vote. It's not that you do, but those that think they are, this is the worst part. And I have the provisional stats for the not registered. Those 16,000 that I talked about provisionals, of those, there were 4,084 that were not registered. What I mean by that is 4,084 voters came in, thought they were, because they got a driver's license. And a lot of them will tell you, wave it right in your face. You see this driver's license? You idiot. I'm registered. And it's not true because of the opt-in. So I feel bad because we want that. Because so these 4,084 were disenfranchised. If we can cure that, even though it's only 4,084, it's something that our goal will be, and hopefully in the future, legislation will go for.
And I think something like that maybe can grab these questions. You know, there's this idea about automatic voter registration that's been floating around. I like to call it authentic voter registration. Why? Because we are connected to Department of Homeland Security databases, Social Security databases. We're connected to vital records at the state, the MVD. We've got all the data on the front. We've got more data than we need to show who is and who is not an actual eligible voter. We just became an ERIC state. We've got addresses for all the eligible but unregistered voters. And from a philosophical perspective, you know, the fundamental right to vote, we've already got the data. It's a fundamental right. We shouldn't be adding extra steps in there, but that's something for policymakers down the street to take care of. For now, I think we're in pretty good shape. I think that consent decree is going to go a long way to helping folks out so that we don't have those 4,000 or 5,000 people show up who believe that they are registered to vote and then not have their vote count. That's just not what we want to do. All right, Joanne Marcus, I might know that name. Has this question. She's deputy registrar, and she asked, could you explain how the Snag and duplication boards work? There's a lot of effort that goes into making sure that all the ballots are counted that most people don't understand. Should we go back to this one? I think so. Cover it real quick. Yeah? Who wants it? Yeah, you do it. Sure. We're training people.
Indeed. So our Snag and duplication boards are two of the processes that we were doing with central board workers. And it starts the day after we start counting. So just a little bit of background for how we are able to start counting those early votes. We are by statute allowed to start counting after a logic and accuracy test of our equipment and no more than 7 days before Election Day. So we start on that 7th day. We tend to have a large number of ballots in the building by that time. And once we do that first day of tabulation, what happens is once those early ballots run through our central count tabulators, they are either counted, they are put into an outstack bin, which means that they were damaged or could not be read by the machine, or they're put into a write-in bin that Christy was mentioning earlier is the last part of our process when we tally those write-ins. So those outstacks, which if you, as you are leaving the lobby, look into the ballot tabulation center, you can see the large 400C central count machines. Those metal trays that are closest to the window, those are the outstack machines, and that's where those ballots go. We take those ballots and they are adjudicated by what's called a snag board, and those snag boards look at the ballot to determine whether it was an overvote on the ballot, so somebody voted for more than the allotted slots on that ballot under one of those races, or if there is some sort of errant mark and that ballot needs to be duplicated. So if the ballot just has an overvote and we're not able to determine that voter's intent, it goes back through and all of the races are counted except for that one race or two, however many races have that overvote. And then those the ballots that are needing duplication go to those duplication boards. And we do that electronically here. So those ballots are scanned into our system and then they are put onto to machines that are in this building and only wired in this building to that server there that holds those duplicated ballots or ballots that need duplication. And they are adjudicated in citizen board groups. So the bipartisan, multipartisan teams that you worked in last year to copy those choices over to ensure that that voter's ballot is counted and all of the races that voter voted on that were valid marks are able to be counted.
All right, so what I'm going to do now is, because we've got a good stack of questions here and I want to get to as many as possible, let's go through a bunch of these real quick and go kind of rapid fire. So I'm just going to ask some of these questions real fast.
Yes.
And then maybe not quite that fast. All right, so Mary Beth Smith, who is here tonight, thank you for coming. Two-part question. Number one, what happens to ballots returned when the voter has moved from that address or is deceased?
That falls under, as an example, in early voting. That's a scenario. We do, as the recorder indicated, that we have different databases to continually try to keep our records updated. But an individual who is deceased, if we get vital statistic, their record affirms they're deceased or no longer here, their record's canceled, even if a ballot went out, and it could occur. Some people have the meanness of going ahead and die after we've mailed them a ballot. But truthfully, and all kidding aside, is that when that record's canceled in our system, and we love to show off our system, so just as an FYI, at any other time you can come and look at that. That is automatically canceled. That ballot cannot be returned. And just as a addition to that, every 100% of all early ballots are signature verified against a known signature for you, the voter. Meaning when you register to vote, we vetted you against all those databases. You are a citizen, you are 18. We tested your address, whether you knew it or not. We go against the post office address change service. So we actually, before we mail, we send you a 90-day notice if you're on a permanent ability. That's you thinking us being nice to you. When in fact it is to say expect a ballot, but it's also to say, and return service requested. Post office returns that to us saying you're not here. That begins the deactivation of that record. So just know we are constantly in a voter registration cleansing to make sure that everybody, not just to disenfranchise and not mail you, but we may need to send you a letter saying update your address so we can get you a ballot.
One of the interesting things about the timing of this, I think that a lot of people don't know. You know, we print, how many peoples did we print sent out this time? Like 1.6 million. Do you actually think that we can print 1.6 million ballots between the end of voter registration and the 48 hours later when early voting begins and we start mailing them out?
And that's 29 days and 27 days.
Yeah, There's a lot of magic going on in this place, but it ain't Hogwarts, okay? So we actually send to our printers the file with the ballot styles, and the addresses and names of these folks a couple of weeks ahead of time. They start printing these ballots, and there are truckloads and we're talking about millions of pieces of mail. So that on the 27th, we've already got them staged out in the mail distribution centers all over Maricopa County. We work closely with the post office so that we can get those out as quick as possible. But that much volume, and now think about this, 29 days before the election is the voter reg cutoff. Most voter registration activity, people thinking about, oh, I gotta change my voter, oh, I got a new address, all this stuff. If it happens between the date we sent the printer the file and the date that it gets mailed, you're gonna get another ballot. You may very well get another ballot, and that's okay. Because we've got those serialized, we've got the signature verification on the back end, and it happens. Every cycle, every election, no matter how big or how small, this is what happens. And that's because we have an enormous complex system. It's not terrible, it's just what happens. Okay, second one from Mary Beth, quickly. Is the paper used for mail-in ballots the same thickness as ballots at voting sites?
The quick answer is yes, absolutely. The requirement in law and best practices is we run our early ballots the same, printing the ballot the same time we print our polling place. We don't want them to be different. So they are run on the same run, if you will, and the only difference is 60% or 1.6 million of our 2.2 million that we print have that red early voting crash printed on the top. They're the exact same ballot, there's nothing different.
Okay, Billy Paulus had a question here. Thank you very much. And the question is, were any provisional ballots counted without the voter being vetted as a citizen and registered voter in Maricopa County? The answer is no, so if so, why? We don't have to worry about that. Also, why was there an opportunity for voters to vote the weekend before the election when the county board of supervisors said no? The county board of supervisors didn't say no. We followed the statute that I talked about earlier. I want to make sure to answer those questions. All right, Louise Lamb. Louise is also here. Again, we're going quick. The public needs to know whether their vote will or will not count if they vote outside their precinct. That's a good one.
And we thank you for the question. And the fact of the matter is, and again, I keep plugging that, the vote center, we had 40 of them. You go there, you're out of precinct, it doesn't matter, we can print the ballot. The reason why, if you go to your home precinct for Acacia 001, that's Ledge District 2, I can't come there from Glendale to a Tempe just because I work there. I can't vote for the Tempe mayor, I live in Glendale. So it's a requirement if you use that model that has pre-printed ballots there to force you to say you can't vote here. I can actually tell you, we have the number, there were 18,743 voters that voted out of precinct that their ballots counted. They went to the vote center. They got the ballot that was for them. They work downtown and they're from Tempe. They walked into our office, which is the vote center, checked in like they were at a polling place, and we printed them the one of 15,000 ballot styles for them. They voted it, done. If they, again, the model where we got to go to a polling place, if they went to the home precinct or they went to a sign and it wasn't theirs, it would not count. So we got to cure that, and one of the solutions is what's sweeping the nation is vote centers looking at that technology.
And again, the pre-printed model only has those pre-printed. So if you go to that precinct and you're not eligible to vote on that ballot, we can't give you the ballot. But that's why it doesn't count if you're out of precinct. So, okay, we're going to run really quick. Francine, is it Ransom? From Facebook, so she couldn't answer this if she wanted to. Francine, thank you for watching. Why did we have a computer system down for over half an hour at lunchtime when most people were coming to vote? That's a great question. We did have an outage during the middle of the day. So many of you who were working there saw that. And here's what actually went down, was that the outage literally only lasted about 8.5 minutes. The problem was that because of the volume of work that happened during that 8.5 minutes and requests, the system had to work through all of those requests. So it looked like we were down for a little over half an hour, actually 20 minutes. We really weren't. It was just that the system had to get all of that work out, which speaks to two things. First of all, the volume that we deal with is enormous, so much so that even a system as advanced as the one we put out there had to work through the issue. But number two, importantly, it only took us 8.5 minutes to go through our source code, find the problem, and fix the problem. Was it an inconvenience for voters? Of course it was, and it's unfortunate. But we got the problem fixed. Again, this stuff is kind of complicated, but the question is, can we fix the problems?
And
Okay.
can I provide just a little bit of context
Sure.
here? Very quickly, just to show what kind of volume we're looking at. We were looking at check-in numbers between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. on election day. And by 7 a.m., we had hit, I think, 27,000 check-ins. So in under an hour throughout the valley, we had just over 27,000 check-ins.
Yeah, and that's a lot of volume. That's a meatball. I just reminded you that old, remember that old commercial? No. All right, Jessica Gomez, board representative. Many states have same-day voter registration. Lawrence County starts something to have vote to do that in the election. I think to vote that way in the elections. Same-day voter registration is an animal of state law, and so that will be. I know that there is a bill that's been introduced at the legislature that might do that. Watch 17th Avenue for that. We just wait for the results at the end of session. A question from the audience. Just typed out. That's interesting. The fun part of being in the voting process is working election center during the 27 days leading up to election day. I think election day is fun too, but okay. The pop-up situations demand quick, calm reactions on the job over the phone guidance. Is it possible to enhance the training of inspectors and judges to include troubleshooting the control computer of the printer? That's a pretty technical question. We don't have any of our vendors in here to answer it.
But those of you that worked at a vote center, that's early voting started 27 days out all the way up to election day. We have those battle on demand printers. So a lot of the time, the one implementing new technology is finding that bug that exists in that new technology. So we are doing some of those where as an example, the August, we didn't trust the board workers to set up the site book because we said, oh, it's probably too technical. In the general, brought everybody in, the inspectors, and you guys got it like that. We should have trusted the instinct because you set up poll books before. These were just bigger and we thought scarier. Same thing with the printers. Right now we have technicians that go out there, but we didn't have enough in the primary, so we ramped that up. But some of it is possible when we re-implement the premium inspector program. We may ask you, are you willing to come in for 5 hours for $5 and learn? See how I slipped that in? Trying to save my money. But learn the battle on demand, because it is something that some of you that work at the vote centers actually it was a paper jam, and it was like intimidating to open that up, but the minute you did, it's like, it's not any other than a copier machine. Take that out there. So we are looking at our program. Actually, I see Brittany, I just give you credit, Brittany back there. If you work, Brittany was doing our training along with Catherine and such. We will take your advice. We will, if you're willing and wanting and able, we are willing to train you to that, and we'll just sit back and bonbons well.
All right, so I'm going to do two questions real quick because they have essentially the same answer. Pam Ruckus on Facebook asks, can we count all early ballots as they come in versus holding them? Second question, seems unrelated. This is Robert Cobb, a voter via Twitter early on, asked, why are we not having an election for the McCain/Kyle/McSally Senate seat, say about March or April this year? That seems to be what the Arizona Constitution requires. We are limited by the statute. Arizona Revised Statute tells us you cannot begin tabulating ballots until 7 days before the election. Period. That's it. We'd like it to be earlier. We'd like to clear all that stuff out. But we can't. Number two, the timing of the vacancy of Senator McCain's seat required the governor to declare a special election for the remainder of the term to occur in November of 2020 because it came too close to the 2018 general election. Had that vacancy occurred earlier in the year, it might have been possible, but it did not. Now, there's a case out there that might change this, the courts will rule on that statute, so on and so forth. We are hamstrung by statute where a lot of times it seems inefficient, it seems a little weird, and it seems like we should be doing it this way. There's a lot of things we wish were different, I'm sure, from all over the place, but the statute dictates on both of those seemingly very, very different things. The rules tell us that this is how it has to be.
Let me just real quickly add to the one about counting earlier. There is legislation out there.
Yes.
That says because all the county reports, some of these are antiquated statutes that talk about paper rosters, why we have to stop early voting at 5 p.m. to update the paper roster. But we got electronic poll books that are real time. We don't need to stop at 5. One of the other things too is in relations to that we have the ability to process and having to look at these antiquated statutes that talk about tie your horse before you go vote, circa 1999. So some of these legislations will help us to say, because we can start counting. We want to start 27 days out, our first ballot is in, we'll start. We need to do a logic and accuracy, we can do that.
Yep.
Because we want those out stacks. If there's going to be dupes to do, we don't want to wait to have 160,000 on the 7th day. We'd rather have increment.
On the 7th day, they tabulated. Penny, Sharon, Penny? Did I get that right? I messed it up. I butchered it, sorry. Board worker, deputy registrar, and voter. Thank you for all 3 of those. Your question is the Arizona Constitution does not give us a fundamental right to vote. True or myth? That is true. We're one of the only states, if not the only state, where our state constitution does not ensure the fundamental right to vote. However, the U.S. Constitution and case law take care of that. So I think we're okay. Y'all are good. And then I have one here from a person who is in attendance, and I cannot read your name, I apologize. What are the qualifications for, Christy, you can do this one. What are the qualifications for a board worker, and how do you ensure their qualifications? And this will be the last one.
Qualifications for board worker, registered to vote in the state of Arizona. There was a question about being registered to vote in Maricopa County, but if you're a registered voter, we are able to hire you and have you work. Primarily, we try to keep you as close to your home as possible. So we recruit by precinct, multi-partisan boards. So that's how we start from the very beginning.
That's my question.
And,
That's your question.
okay, and I'm sorry.
No, excellent.
And so, listen, I want to get a little closer, and then I've got a question to do if you haven't done it already. Christy?
Okay, I'll go
Last
first.
thought.
I just want to reiterate the thank yous for all of the hard work, not just this year, but for every year. I know some of you have been around the block a time or two with us, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for your participation tonight. Hopefully, we will be able to have more interaction with you as we move forward, but I look forward to our future.
Thank you. Great. Where you want to go last, right? No, you go ahead.
Again, I reiterate that I thank you all, not only for your participation, but for this feedback. And this doesn't end the feedback. Again, we're online. You can see we have, one of the things I want to close out with is we're trying to do a better job. Sometimes we have technology that we have to deal with, but we want your feedback. And one of the key things that I wanted to note was the vote center process. Did I say it enough? Is probably some of the things we need the support from the constituency to say. We like that, because it's not any different. It just happens to be that you still go to polling place if you want to go in person. If you want to vote early, that's allowed as well. Basically what ends up happening, and even if we get to an all mail, which I think by 2024, those of you that are in-person voters saying I will, let me tell you now that all mail voting is not removing that process. You have 3 options in all mail voting. Get your ballot by mail, return it by mail. Get your ballot and vote, or number 2, vote at your new polling place called your couch. But you don't like the mailman because it's something he's done to you, then drop it off. Now that's a bad thing, but you can drop it off in 27 days. Or with all mail voting, there is still a polling place open on election day. It's just called replacement balloting. So you can come in at 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. and do that. So again, tell us what you want, but let us also tell you what's available, vote centers, what technology is there, and help us, I don't want to say fight for that, but we're in legislative session. There's some things out there that are possibly harmful to you as an early voter that should not be harmed, or even as an in-person voter. So make your voice heard and help us.
Help yourself. Are you going to steal my thunder?
You see my note? I would never steal your thunder.
Whatever, you can do it. But
I just wanted to thank everybody who's here and everybody on Facebook and all of our partners who've worked with us to make elections better for our voters, specifically the general public who comes in and does yeoman's work around the election as central board workers and comes in and helps us with that early voting process as well. And you know, please let us know how we can be better partners, how we can communicate better as well. We have a variety of ways for folks to get involved, so getinvolved.maricopa.vote, or is it just getinvolved.vote?
Getinvolved.vote.
Getinvolved.vote. You can go there, you can sign up to be a deputy registrar, you can sign up to be a board worker there, you can get in our system, you can get our email and text alerts as well, and then additionally, make sure that you are tracking your ballot when you vote from home. So we have a variety of ways to do that. There is a text message service. There is also a way to check on our website as well. And I will close just with vote center, vote center, vote center.
Thank you, the three of you, for all the work that you do. You know, the fun part about this job is that I get to get up and sometimes get a pat on the back, and I try to pass that along to the staff, many of whom are here among you and folks who have worked here. It's sometimes fun to engage in the pugilism of this job as well, although a little bit less comfortable sometimes. But at the end of the day, for me, it is a great honor and a great privilege and a great responsibility to be doing this. And I really, really do, you know, I really do pay a lot of attention to the oath that I took, essentially the same oath when I enlisted in the Marine Corps as I did when I took this office. And that is to uphold and protect the Constitution of the United States of America and the state of Arizona and the laws thereof for all of us, because we're all in this together. And we're going to agree, we're going to disagree, and that's cool. That's how America works. And I'm really, really glad that we can all agree that this part of it needs to work a little bit better, and we're all willing to jump in and help, right? Because I know there are Democrats and Republicans and Libertarians, there might be a green or two in here, you know, and some independents and non-party designated folks. We're all Americans at the end of the day, and that's what makes this whole thing phenomenal. So I want to thank you personally from myself, on behalf of not only the folks here, but everybody else who's made this possible. Special thanks to all the folks who stuck with us through this last hour and a half out on Facebook Live and submitted your questions. We're going to pay a lot of attention to some of the issues that have been brought up here. We're going to continue to try to make this better. Thank you very much for coming up. And before we all go, I think, Christina, you're going to take that microphone and give a couple of quick closing instructions.